So the reason for this is because, Charles Darwin, obviously, that's what this entire quiz is about. But Alfred Wallace actually independently developed natural selection before him. The only other answer with Darwin is Lyell, and Lyell actually was like the father of geology, so I can't be answered. The answer is B here. So 8, which of the following statements about Darwin is true? A, B, C, or D? So the answer to 8 was none of the above. So A is not true. His theory was very well received by the scientific community. B, that's just not true because he said that advantages in terms of like physical fitness was not like which animals were the biggest or the strongest, but which could survive the best based on the environment they were in. C, on the origin of species did sell very, very well, and it was a huge thing in biology. Okay, 9, Darwin and Wallace's theory of evolution by natural selection failed to explain how. Okay, so the answer to 9 is B. Remember, this is also the common question again. Darwin and Wallace could not explain genetic variation because they didn't know anything about genetics at the time. Okay, so number 10. The evolution of one species into two or more species as a result of different populations becoming reproductively isolated from each other is A, B, or C. Okay, so the answer to 10 is A, and I mean the other two answers don't really make any sense, B and C. So the answer is A. So 11 and 12 we don't really have to cover. So now we're going to, I mean that was pretty much evolution. So we're going to get into pretty much just tips and tricks for how you can improve, I mean, your general test taking abilities and for biology specifically. Because there's like a few things you should know before, answering all these questions. So just how to answer questions in general. So there's two types of questions. There's essay questions and there are multiple choice. So for essay questions, how do you organize it? So the best trick is to just get right to the answer. A lot of kids will do things like the reason why cell respiration is the first photosynthesis is not only does this waste your time, but like teachers don't really care about seeing this. You can just say, so just jump right into like your differences. Like cell respiration uses glucose and oxygen, while photosynthesis uses water and carbon dioxide. So you can just jump straight into that. You don't have to put fillers like these in your answers. Make sure you're following the question, right? Because a lot of questions will ask you to state evidence, give examples to support your answer, or explain why. This is really, really, really important to pay attention to because often if you don't do this, you're going to lose a lot of credit on your responses. And a good way to think about all long answer questions is the teachers are kind of grading it like it's a checklist, right? You have like maybe like 5 things that the teacher is looking for a total of 5 points. And if you say those 5 things anywhere in your response, they're going to give you 5 points or full credit. So something that you can do to make sure you get those 5 points is just use meaningful vocabulary. Because oftentimes teachers will just look for like meaningful vocabulary, and this is a good indicator to them that you know what you're talking about. So using meaningful vocabulary in your response is often really, really helpful. Um, Another thing is if talking about a process or talking about like a list of things, you can always just use a bulleted list. It saves a lot of time when writing because like you're not just writing first or second or third or fourth. You can just use a bulleted list. It really makes everything quicker and it also makes it neater and more organized for your teacher to see. So I mean, those are just general organization things that you can use. So getting into an example of a lot of fluff where like you can just take out all of this. See, you could probably take out half of this paragraph. Um, I mean, this is just an example question. Assuming the question was, why are cell respiration and photosynthesis different? So first of all, you can take out, again, this filler. The reason why cell respiration and photosynthesis are different is because, so, you have 2 reasons here. You're saying these 2 processes are opposite. One is in animals, one is in plants. Then you're talking about the products as well as the reactants in each. And then, you don't have to say things like this is only one difference. Just list all of your differences. Make sure that, don't waste time while writing because, especially on exams, time is very limited. So if you can save time, you can use that in other ways to help proofread or things like that. So next, so this is just an example question. Give 3 steps of cell respiration and a description of each. So this is just a response I read quickly. So I mean, this is a good format for it, right? You're just saying the 3 steps here, another step here, another step here, and then you're just quickly explaining each step. So for questions like these, you do not need to go into like super detailed explanations unless this question is the only question on your test. Often a good way to see, how detailed do I need to go into this question is to look at the point value of the question. If the question is worth like 10 points out of, maybe 50, then you probably do want to go into a lot of detail. But if the question is worth 3 points out of 100, then you probably don't want to go into that much detail because there's a lot of other questions on the test. So that's also a good indicator. The point value can tell you a lot of the question itself. So pay attention to that. So this is just a sample response of something that you would want to write on a question like this. This would be if your teacher isn't looking for that much detail and they just want to see that you know each step of cell respiration and you pretty much can describe it in basic detail. So this is an example. So another example could be if they're asking you to use a punnet square or some kind of diagram or anything like that. So with long answer questions like these, math kind of questions, you want to always show your work. So a question like this, a lot of you will probably be able to just do in your head. It's not that hard, but teachers want to see the punnet square. Teachers want to see the work that you're doing. They want to see how you calculate the probability, things like that. So just drawing the punnet square out is going to be really, really key. Even for questions that are as easy as this. Some teachers will take off for it. Some teachers will just write you a note or something. But for questions like these, make sure you use a punnet square and make sure you show all your work. So yeah, that's it for these kind of questions. Okay, so now for multiple choice. So multiple choice are a little bit different. There's a lot more tips and tricks you can use to eliminate answers. And even if you don't know the answers, you can always take a guess, even if you completely don't know the answer. So one good tip is to look for repeat answers. So what do I mean by repeat answers? Well, sometimes teachers will, or like just question writers will put two of the same answer in a different way in the question. So if the question is like, I don't know, like what are alleles, right? So one answer might be they are macromolecules, or another answer might be they are proteins. Well, you know that proteins are macromolecules. So saying they are macromolecules is pretty much the same thing as saying they are proteins. So clearly those two answers cannot be correct. So looking for repeat answers is a really, really good tip that can help you eliminate some answers. Number two, try to use elimination, the process of elimination. If you don't know the answer at all, and you're saying, oh, it could be this one, it could be this one, go through each answer choice and try to figure out a reason why this answer would be correct. And for those that are weak, and you know your reasoning is weak, you're like, yeah, this probably isn't the right answer, then just eliminate it and move on. Because you don't want to have like, it's much harder to decide from four answer choices, and you're constantly trying to reason between four answer choices than two or three. So that's another really, really good tip. So next tip is if you're looking at a question with all of the above or none of the above, again, there's good tricks for that. These are pretty logical, but if one of the answers is all of the above and one answer can be identified as wrong, then it's not all of the above. And if you find two answers that are correct in all of the above question, then it is all of the above. If you find two answers that are correct. And then for none of the above, if you find one answer that's right, then it's that one. So the final tip is read the question carefully. This is like a really, really, really important tip that I guess a lot of people have heard, but they don't really internalize it. So often I find that, people say read the question carefully, but then you always end up making mistakes when reading the question. So a good way to prevent that is to just look out for the words that are going to trip you up. So for example, increasing, decreasing, activate, or inhibit. Pretty much just when you're reading the question, oftentimes it's nice to just bring an under or tool to underline or mark up your text, even a pencil, and just circle these big words like not or, increasing, decreasing, any two words that are opposites. And this is going to really, really help you to make sure you read the question carefully. So yeah. Okay, so this is an example of a question. So I'll let you guys do this one. The amino acids in the center of proteins are A, B, C. or D? Okay, so the answer here was A. So again, the kind of trick here was the repeat answers. So remember that hydrophobic, or sorry, hydrophilic and soluble are two things that mean the same. Um, so if an amino acid is soluble, and that means it also must be hydrophilic. So that means because B and C are the same thing, it cannot be correct. You can eliminate B and C. Um, if you have, I mean, can't be D, so then by process of elimination, it's most definitely A. So yeah, the answer was A. Okay, so just general tips and tricks for test taking. Some of you might already know these or do these. One thing that I find really helpful is to know the common questions. There's some exams where they will ask these questions, they will always ask these questions. So I was talking about that when we talked about evolution, right? I said that Darwin not knowing genetics is a really, really common question that you'll see a lot. So know those common questions. A good way to do this is to take a lot of practice exams. There's tons of quizzes on Google that you can find for these. Often just taking them and knowing the common questions can really, really help you to not trip up on those. Because um, in like every course, there are certain questions that they ask every single time just because they're tricky, things like that. So the more questions you do, the more likely you stumble across these and be able to answer them at the time of your test. So the final thing is review beforehand. Um, I mean, a lot of kids think that biology is very, very hard just because the amount of material that there is. But honestly, the more you review, the easier it becomes. And this is like tried and true methods. I've seen it like happen tons of times before. The kids who like study and review, make sure they memorize it, who review the most are the ones that do the best on exams. Also, a lot of people like to do the cramming strategy where they just cram like a day before the exam. And this is like a really, really bad strategy. And it's like the worst use of your time. Like if you try to cram an hour before the exam, um, it's not going to help. So usually teachers will announce that there is an exam like a week before. So in that week, maybe take 2 days and just spend like 10, 15 minutes and just review that material. And by the time or the day before the exam, because you've already reviewed it twice, it'll be really, really easy for you to review it that third time. Oftentimes, just reviewing the material the period before, it just refreshes you and puts you in that mindset for that test. So just try, if you can, in that class, just review the material the period before. Um, this should only take like 5, 10 minutes because it should be like your third or fourth time actually going over this material. So at that point, you should really, really know. And I mean, if you do this and you make sure that you know everything that the teacher gives you in the notes packet, most of the time teachers get their questions from notes packet or notes packets that they give out. So as long as you know those like 100%, then you'll find that your exams become really, really easy. And that's often the reason why people don't do well on exams, like they'll get like B's and C's, just because of the fact that they didn't review enough times. The more times you review, the better you'll know the material. Another really, really good strategy is a lot of times teachers give you review sessions, like the day before the exam. So what I like to do in those review sessions, maybe, you have reviewed a ton of times and you think that, I don't need this. So you just start doing other work or whatever, not paying attention. A good way to just take advantage of that review session while also, not wasting your time is to just write down anything that you didn't know in that review session. So if somebody asks a question and you're like, oh wait, I don't know that question, I don't know the answer, just let the teacher answer it and write that down. Write that answer down and make sure that you know it. So when the test comes around, you'll know that material. So that's a good way I find to take advantage of review sessions. And the final thing is look out for or find patterns in your teacher in some sense. So like a lot of teachers, right, like they'll just use one source for the questions. So for example, my teacher often just used our notes packets that she gave us for the questions. And pretty much if you knew those notes, you would be fine for the exams and you would probably get an A, most likely an A plus on all of the exams. So just find that source where your take teachers take most of their questions from and just study from that and make sure you memorize that. I mean, if you do all of this and you just make sure that you're giving the teacher what they want in every question, you'll be fine in biology and in general with all of your exams. So yeah, a lot of people say that biology is like the hardest like course for freshmen in high school, just because of the fact that it's a completely new environment and also the course has a lot of material in it. So just use these tips and tricks to help you with your exams. Okay, so that's all for today. I think we went over everything we needed to. If you guys have any questions, just type them in the chat. Well, it looks like nobody has any questions. I mean, this is not really like the most questionable material. But today was our second to last class. We will be having our last class next week on Monday, and we will just be going over plants. We have time to do so we can do that. So going over plants, just basic anatomy of plants and basic things you need to know about plants. And then a little bit more detailed photosynthesis with the types of plants. So that's what we'll be doing next class. So thank you all for attending, and I will see you all next week. Bye.